Carl and Brendan here from Brrraains A Head-Banging Life, gbhblofficial for short, and it is track by track time as we're doing something dark. It is a black metal album by the Norwegian band Mayhem. In fact, it's their debut album, De Mysteriis Dom Sathanas. So obviously this is going all the way back to the infamous days of Mayhem. In fact, songwriting for this album began in 1987, but as should be no secret to most people with a little bit of knowledge about black metal, this was all put on hold because of the suicide of vocalist dead Olin, and the murder of guitarist Euronymous, of course, Oystein Areseth. It was delayed until 1994. May 1994, so 7 years after the songwriting started, and it's the only studio album to feature Areseth and although I hate even having to say his name, here it is, Varg, aka Count Grishnak Verkenis. Yes, never forget that he called himself Count Grishnak because he couldn't be big enough, bigger twat enough to have a name like that. But it is considered to be one of the most influential black metal albums of all time. So yeah, that's about it on that thing. I will say I've never listened to this album in full. I never really wanted to, but there are a couple of tracks that I am quite familiar with.
Yeah, I think I'm about the same. Don't think I ever listened to it in full. Certainly didn't when it came out. I wasn't listening to any sort of black metal like this, I don't think, in 1994. But yeah, knew a couple of tracks.
Yep, we're going to get into it and give you the thoughts on each track. So we start with Funeral Frog, and I'm expecting this to sound like shit. That was my first thought before I even pressed play. It's going to sound like shit, even if you're fucking around with it in modern day production. You can only do so much, and I'm not wrong. But I'm also like a little bit pleased here that it's more listenable than I thought. As an opening track, it's all about hitting the instruments as hard as possible and the vocals howling and scowling in a senseless way. It's not pretty, but it's not terrible either. I kind of like the chaos. I always kind of enjoy that side of things. And there is creativity showcased with shifting tempos. However, and I don't know, mate, this is just me, I think the vocals, while evil sounding, they're a bit crap.
I mean, I definitely have that across many parts of the album, although not quite 100% in this one. So, I guess even though I hadn't listened to this album in full, there wasn't really like a surprise in terms of what it musically it was going to be. Like, it wasn't like, oh, I wonder if it's going to be completely different to what I expect. It's like, no, it's not going to be, and it's intense, it's aggressive, it's very, very quick. The drums are insane, and the overall sound and production. Weird listening to it now, I guess, because back then you wouldn't have known this, but it's kind of like the standard a lot of black metal bands, especially in modern times, get kind of judged against to say you are or you're not true enough. It's that sort of sound. Don't know if it's necessarily just this album, but it's certainly like the sort of thing that I can hear people saying, oh, Mayhem, true black metal, Cradle, or something like that. I think the riffs are good. Like it is very much about speed. This opening track, the drums and guitars don't really take a lot of time. I'll give you a lot of time to settle, and it just kind of hits like constantly. The vocals are weird. They're definitely weird. They're twisted. I enjoyed them all in this song in a kind of like all these weird sort of way. But other than the way that he delivers the song title, because he says that quite a lot, the Funeral Frog stuff, and I just thought that was really fucking weird. And I didn't enjoy that. But even like, again, like the bit, like I guess, like you said, like even within all of the sort of speed and, aggression and everything like that, like there are little moments, and there's actually like a surprising amount of catchiness to parts of the song, that was probably more surprising to me than anything else. That I was like, this is really fast, really aggressive. The vocals are really weird, but like, I don't know, you sort of settle into it, don't you? And you're like, it's really catchy, this bit. And like, I don't know, man, I feel sometimes you feel like you're saying the wrong thing, and it's like Brendan's listening to Mayhem and going, well, this is catchy. Yeah,
your mind just sort of attunes to it after that initial blast. Okay, Freezing Moon. I was excited by the slower and darker tempo at the start here. It sounds quite atmospheric, which made me laugh because I was like, I didn't think this band was allowed to do stuff like this. I thought it was supposed to be a blast stuff. Then I was expecting a shift in the black metal nonsense, but actually this one turns into something groovier and listenable. Unfortunately, someone must have realized their black metal credentials were being lost because everything just speeds up and it's the same old, same old. The vocals are a little better because they're almost spoken word, with certain sentences being given this yelp at the end. I'll go easy on this one overall because I think it's got a bit more going on, especially with the drop back into a slower pace at the halfway point.
Yeah, it's quite similar again. Nice intro. Like the ringing melody, sits nicely alongside the drums and the darker riffs. Again, very, very catchy in those opening minutes and quite different to maybe what I was expecting. And certainly catchier than I would have thought with guessing what I was expecting to come from Mayhem. Yeah, it transforms obviously into a different beast altogether. The drums go back to kind of going a million miles per hour. I like, same as you said, the sort of darker, slower, more menacing vocals. I like the pace of the song. I like how it switches tempo up to drop back out and into a more sort of drawn out rhythmic section. Although I do find the vocals in those slower sections to be a little more challenging because I think I think when it's slower or when there's less going on, you focus more on it. Whereas when it's going really like hell for leather, the vocals are there and it's doing the same thing, but it's kind of bedded in more with the music. So it kind of just becomes like the whole sound.
Yeah.
Rather than not quite isolated, but it's clearer, when the drums are slowed down a bit. And I think, depends on what it's hard to do this, right? Because I don't say like he's not a great vocalist because it's stylistic, isn't it? That's the thing, and if he suddenly started crooning or something like that, that also wouldn't work. So it's just that he goes through quite a lot of different vocal styles across the whole album and often in the song. Some that usually when it gets darker and deeper, I like it more than I do the sort of quite barky, almost yelpy sort of sections, but like overall, I like the song. Just had some challenging moments with the vocals, and it's also got a really great solo in this one.
How's that, folks, for a single track analysis by Brendan? Absolutely fucking tore that one into pieces to
I do love my words,
everything.
don't I?
Yeah. Cursed in Eternity. Look, I don't take much from this track, and I actually had to listen to this one several times because I kept switching off. I don't know. I find this kind of black metal what I would deem, and you kind of said it about the first track, where it's basically the bar setter for old school black metal. If I'm reviewing something these days and I use the term old school black metal, I'm referencing a track like this, which is just boring because it hammers away and has no hooks. Yes, it's heavy. Yes, it's evil sounding, but is it actually good? I don't think so.
Yeah, this is one of a couple, but definitely one that I actually really struggled with the vocals like massively. I thought song wise, like you go straight in with pace and crazy drums. I didn't love, but I quite liked the oddness to the fact that the music goes like about a million miles an hour and the singing at the beginning is really slow and drawn out. And that kind of like, by the time he sort of said one word, I would imagine the drum has hit like 4,000 times. And it's quite weird and contrasting because that's not like it's not quite normal behavior, right? Normally when the music's going fast, the vocals are coming out fast. And when the music slows down, the vocals slow down. So I quite like the oddness to that. I just genuinely in this song don't like the vocals. Overall, I don't like the vocals. I think musically it's quite cool in terms of it's just very, very intense, very, very aggressive and doesn't really kind of let up from that. With the only actual change in it coming quite near the end when as fast as I thought it had been up until this point, it suddenly then just goes, just go a little bit faster as we end, But other than that, it's quite a flat song with some challenging vocals. So yeah, didn't love it.
There it is. Brendan's not so positive words about Mayhem is creating an environment where he is as if he's about to get abducted. I swear it was like an alien just went with a light on you.
I don't know what this is. I've got like a light beside me, man, but I'm like, I don't know. It seems to change its own brightness. Must be like some sort of like sensor or something. Like if I move forward, it's like, oh.
It's just quite funny the way it just lit up like you would Curse them. Pagan Fears is up next. There is talent here, though, and this is shown by tracks like this. Even if it's often just in parts of tracks, and that is very much the case here as the Blackened Ferocity takes on more garish forms, but at differing speeds and with different layers of darkness. This one feels less egregious, and with that, far less mind-numbing. It isn't perfect, because nothing on this album is, but for me, I found this one way more enjoyable than the mush I think I've been listening to so far.
Yeah, I was a fan of this one too.
Mm.
Again, fast and heavy, but also very catchy. Lots of infectious drum beats and a nice difference, really. I think in terms of tempos, like just changing it up a little bit. And after like 3 songs of not really having that, like I think it was very important for me anyway. Listening to it, that like something else happened. So I do like the way that they switch tempo. I like how smoothly they do it too, especially when they drop down to a sort of slower, chunkier sound and then build back up to the speed and then drop down again. I really like the song a lot as well, and it sounds like an insult, but it's certainly not meant to be that. I just think it's a good song in that the first 2 minutes of it is pure music, like no vocals whatsoever. It's just like an extended intro of just manic riffing and drums. There are vocals in the song, and I like them when they join. They blend in well with the music. They're still menacing and still sinister, but they are just used more sparingly in this track, as it seems to focus more just on the music and riffs and drums. So yeah, I said like it's not because he's not singing on it that I like it, because I liked it even when he is singing, but
Yeah,
it just works a bit better for me because it's predominantly, it's not an instrumental, but it's like large chunks of it feels like that.
yeah. So we got positive things to say about this album, and that continues in The Life Eternal, because fuck, it doesn't get much heavier than this intro. The carnage is eye-watering at first. Thankfully, when it does settle down, it shows off more of that dark and horror-laden sound with a fair bit more coldness. Ever so often, you get these bursts of flame and ferocity reminding you that you are listening to Mayhem. But what the fuck is with the sudden vocal volume increase, though? I'm gonna presume this is a production issue more than anything else. Also, I did note here, I think you can hear the bass more prominently. Like, it's actually more notable in this track, but I will say it's not doing anything worth getting excited about.
Yeah, I quite like this one. I think it's fast and fiery, drops to a slower tempo again with a nice bit of rhythm to it. Some more really odd vocal styles, but most of them I quite liked here. And there's a sort of quite slightly higher, quite maniacal barking thing that he does, which I think, I don't know why this time I liked it. Seemed to work for me in the song. And also another good solo. So I found this one to be quite different, maybe other than the previous track, but from everything else that had come so far on the album. And as well as that, I did also notice the bass. I did write down that it also seems to have some of the more elaborate guitar and bass work on this track.
Yeah.
So overall, I liked it. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, from the dark past, I know I was getting a bit bored of this particular sound now. I'm finding it hard to take anything away, aside from some strong drumming. There's just not enough texture, not enough vibrancy, not enough dynamic thinking to make me ever see a track like this as nothing but an old school, forgettable black metal number.
For me, another track that hits hard with a big dollop of rhythm in the intro and then transform into a ridiculous song with some of the most insane drumming in the album so far. I quite like in this one again the oddity in that this time it's like the drums that are going 100 miles an hour. The guitars then are much more drawn out, so like the two instruments are almost kind of clashing, and then when the vocals come in, they're even slower than the guitars. You've got like these 3 things happening, but all of them are going at a different pace. But I liked that. I thought that was quite cool and makes for an interesting sound. And I like the slower, deeper, demonic, just that deeper edge to the vocals, to be honest with you. I just always prefer that anyway. And I really like the slowed down section with the drums that fill gaps between the guitars. So for me, this was one of my favorite.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Check that. Fair enough. That's how it goes sometimes. We take different things away from it. All right. Penultimate track, Buried by Time and Dust. Happily for me, this is more palatable because it is the shortest track in the album. That means the blasting speed and brutish heaviness doesn't have the time to melt my mind. Although it does come pretty damn close, as it's an out-and-out monstrosity of speed and heaviness again.
Yes. Shortest one on the album, like I said, by a considerable distance, actually. Very fast, very fiery. Still has a very, very cold and harsh sound. Still very raw. And that sort of overall sound that is kind of synonymous with true black metal, I guess. vocals are twisted and demonic, drums and guitars blazing out at a serious speed. I think the lead guitars are half buried beneath the intense drumming. And actually, for me, on a lot of the songs, but on this one in particular, the drums are almost take over the song to a degree. It's almost like I don't know, the drummer is the important one, and everyone else is backing him sometimes. And also just the general sort of speed, like, you know, start worrying for him a little bit. I think like he's going to be sore in the morning, isn't he? Jesus. So look,
youngsters, isn't it?
Yeah. So I mean, I do quite like it as a song. I think it's like just a quite a nice, fast sort of black metal assault. But without really standing out too much. It's just, it's okay.
There's nothing wrong with it, as you say. And that brings us to the title track, the final track, the Mysteriis Sathanas. Probably the track I am most familiar with. In fact, I think I've heard this live when we saw them at Incineration Fest a few years back. And this track gets the balance for me of unrelenting heaviness, chilling darkness, and terrific sinisterness more right than any other. For me, it's a mighty fine finish with some variety, including exemplified, should I say, by clean singing, which is a real surprise, but a really nice one.
Yeah. I think the first thing I pointed out on this, and it was down to the vocals, really. It was just that by the time I got to this one, and there've been quite a lot of different styles and everything like that, I was starting to question whether or not I liked any of the singing, or I liked some of it, or was I just kind of being intrigued by it because it was like
it's a mixed
first
bag.
time listening to it, you know. But on this one, musically, cool old traditional sound with plenty of strong riffing and quick drumming again, but I really did not like what I put down as, you think you might be talking about the same section, but you put down as clean vocals and I put down as wailing.
I mean, that's it, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm really struggling with them, and even though I don't like all of it, I actually prefer the more bark style of vocals over this. And it was around that time when I started questioning, like, well, but I said I didn't like the barky sort of vocals either. I was like, do I like any of this? But look, overall, I just think it's a decent song, and I like it, a lot of it, a lot of the stuff on the album musically. But I think some of the singing styles are questionable. But then because they're surrounded by strong music, I often come out feeling quite 50-50 about them, and I did on this one.
Yeah, for me, I agree with what you say there, in the sense that for me, the biggest issue across the entire album as well is vocals more than anything else. And I kind of sit like you. I'm still 50-50 in them. Sometimes it's perfectly fine. All right. And that's kind of how I feel about the album overall. I'm 50-50 now. I'm glad I've now heard the full thing. I'm not surprised it pretty much turned out how I expected it to, but I was pleased to find moments of creativity and imagination here and there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's not a bad album by any stretch of the imagination. It's just not.
And this is, unnecessary listening. If you are a black metal fan, I guess at some point, just do it. Yeah. So top 3 tracks. Then you want to take this one away?
Yeah. All 3 of my favorite tracks in this came in a row, bang in the middle of the album. So I have Pagan Fears, Life Eternal, and From the Dark Past.
Mine are pretty spread out, but we do double up on Pagan Fears. Arguably, I think then that's probably the best track we would suggest you listen to. But I've got Freezing Moon, and I've got the title track, De Mysteriis Sathanas, which of course is the album title as well. And that was our track by track for it by Mayhem. You know what to do. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. If you'd like to see more content like this, please consider hitting the subscribe button. It is gratefully appreciated. You can find us over at gbhbl.com, our full website where reviews, news and so much more goes up daily. We're also on all social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Threads, at gbhbl. Just search for gbhbl and you will find us out there. We also have merchandise on sale. You can access the shop via the website.